and then I'll just use Michelle after that.
hmm Just like
Okay.
Oscar Mayer hot dog.
Michelle Harmeier. All right. Are we ready?
Yes.
Welcome to Spilling Tea with Betty Desire. My guest today is Michelle Harmeier. Hi, Michelle. How are you doing?
I'm doing great. Thanks, Betty.
It's great to talk to you. I have some questions for you to help introduce you to our audience. First, tell us a little bit about yourself and your journey to where you are in the world now.
Okay, well, this is a long story that I'll try to condense down. And thank you for having me as your first guest on Spilling the Tea, Betty. I really appreciate you inviting me. Just to give you some context, I was born in 64. So I'm a 60-year-old person. And I was born in the Los Angeles area, spent all my life in different regions of California, Southern California, Central, and Northern. And I think I had a pretty typical middle class upbringing. I was very fortunate to have two parents that kind of stuck together through thick and thin, but they were really young. They got together at 17 and 19 and had four kids in 6 years. And again, this was the 60s, very tumultuous cultural times, particularly in Southern California with the Watts riots and some of the things that were going on. I have three siblings, and my parents were small business owners. So my dad started a small business in the trucking industry, doing repairs near the port of LA, and so he was an entrepreneur. And so we were a family that moved around a few times because, kind of like the Jeffersons, we were kind of moving on up in those days. And what I didn't realize until I was adult, a lot of it had to do with white flight. My parents were trying to move us into nicer neighborhoods and kind of avoiding the Long Beach School District desegregation busing systems. And they were dodging things. I didn't know this as an adult, but we moved a few times as a school age kid. Um, but I did realize pretty early on that I love being really active and participated in lots of things. My siblings didn't, but I joined the band. I stayed after school. I did all the sports. I joined the choir and clubs. I became a bowler. I was really involved, and this is all just through sixth grade. But I did find some success that I could be successful, especially in sports. Because if people have met me, they know I'm a 6 foot tall, kind of long, athletically built person. So I found success pretty early in sports. So I ended up playing basketball and volleyball in high school and ended up getting a full ride scholarship to go to college. And neither of my parents graduated from high school. So they really didn't know how to help me go to college or encourage college. They were kind of scared of college because remember what they were watching on the news in the 60s, the wild things happening on campuses, the Vietnam protests, the hippies, the drugs, the free love. They really were never encouraging us to move through an educational career. So I kind of had to fight my way into that world. And they were supportive, but I kind of had to do it on my own. They really just literally didn't know how to help me, but said, let us know. We'll help you pay for college, but we just don't know really how to get you there. So I did go to college. I played basketball. I had a scholarship. I played for a couple of years, then quit after having lots of injuries. But I ended up graduating as a graduate in ornamental horticulture. Not a lot of people know what that is. It's in the School of Agriculture, but essentially it was the plant industry. If you think about retail nurseries, wholesale nurseries, golf course management, parks management, but I focused on landscape design and construction. So I sat down, as a 23-year-old in a room with about 400 men and got my C-27 contractor's license back in the early 80s and started my own landscaping business right out of college. So I did that for about 5 years. I knew that I was going to get a master's degree in something, didn't know what it was going to be, but I decided it wasn't the landscape world that I wanted because I started coaching basketball. After school, I was helping with a girls' team and kind of fell in love with the education world. So I got my credential instead of a master's and became a sixth grade teacher and took about a three-quarters pay cut. Back then I was making over 100,000 a year as a business owner, and I went down to $26,500 a year to become a sixth grade teacher. And I was never happier. It was a really important, good change for me. But I did continue my education. I got a master's degree, and then I became a school administrator pretty quickly, and became a school principal, opened a few schools, then went back to school when I was about 48, got my PhD and my EDD, my doctorate degree, and in organizational leadership, and moved into the district level of management and leadership and human resources. And then I finally retired from education after almost 30 years as a superintendent of schools. That was during COVID. No one wanted to be a superintendent of schools during COVID. It was the worst job after the medical industry jobs. But then I retired in 2021 and moved here to Bellingham with my partner. So there's my life in 5 minutes.
All right. So basically, from now on, I should call you Dr. Michelle.
You could. It was
I could.
Dr. Harmeier before I retired, but I hate hearing that because it reminds me of my other life. So you could just call me Michelle.
All right then. All right then. So tell us a little bit about what brought you to Bellingham.
You know, my partner and I knew we were going to retire out of California. We wanted to come to the PNW. So in about 2017, we started searching where it was going to be because I was going to retire, within the next, 5 or so years. So we kind of had some criteria, and Bellingham met all the criteria. It was a college town, so I could work in retirement, possibly as an adjunct, because it has a great school of education here at WWU. I wanted to be by the coast. I needed a cool climate, and we just loved being close to Canada too. And in 1987, I did a bike tour through the San Juan Islands with my girlfriend, and that was about 1986 or seven. And I said, one day I am going to live up here. So it was just kind of destiny. And when Bellingham was not well known, but when we searched, what are the gayest cities in the PNW, it kind of came up as the top five. Seattle, Portland, Astoria, Vancouver, Washington, and Bellingham popped up over and over again. So we started going on vacations and just visiting each of these cities every vacation. And so after visiting all of them, we came to Bellingham, and that was it. Within 6 hours, we knew this was going to be the place that we were going to retire. So we got here in July of 2021, right when the pandemic was easing and the state said we're opening up. So it was a very quiet year of arriving in Bellingham, of riding our bikes around and going to every possible little restaurant parklet, and anyone who had an outdoor coffee or restaurant place. And we spent a lot of time at Pickford Theater and Mount Baker Theater because that was just about it for things to do during that first year coming out of COVID.
Interesting. Tell us a little bit about your queer aha moment.
Oh, there's so many aha moments when you're a queer person. I'm 60. I could probably come up with at least 60 of them. But really there are about 3 moments, and I think it's important to describe each moment because as an older, queer person, as an elder, we didn't have the vocabulary and it really the kind of the context that we have now. But now I can go back in time and I have some words for it. So I'm going to go back. My first moment was really when I was about 5 years old. So remember, I was born in 64. So I was going to kindergarten around 69. And I realized that at that point, gender was the thing that I was struggling with because you're just not that sexually aware maybe at 5 years old, but I was not a typical girl who was interested in the job assignments given to girls and women or the toys or games that girls were interested. I wanted short hair. I didn't want to wear a shirt for summer time and swimming time with all the boys that I played with. I wanted to wear boys' clothes. And, back then they called us tomboys because, we were just acting like the boys. So I just knew that very early on, I really resented the training attempts that were pushed onto me to learn to be a girl and to be a servant of the boys in my family, like cleaning up the kitchen after dinner or cleaning the house when the boys got to watch TV. And I was really kind of saying, I don't want this job. I don't like these activities. I don't play with dolls. I'm not a nurturing kind of a person. I'm active. I'm athletic. I want to be outside. I want to do the lawn and the landscaping. So I really think that 5-year-old time, it was apparent to me that I was gender nonconforming because I wasn't conforming to what girls were assigned to do. The drop down menu that's saying, "Oh, you have these parts anatomically, then you're supposed to do this, this, and this, and wear that, that, and that, and behave like this." And you're right. And it's like that didn't match my personality. And I was admonished in kindergarten, because in kindergarten back in those days there was a boys dress up box and there was a girls dress up box during playtime. And of course, I wanted to play in the boys box. I wanted to put on the fireman's cap and the construction helmet and the different things that the boys were playing with, because those were more interesting to me. But I was really shamed and admonished and punished really by the teachers. So I just stopped playing dress up altogether. I'm like, I didn't even go to that section anymore. Um, but it was really kind of that 5-year-old, like, I'm not a typical girl aha moment. And there were no women in my whole neighborhood that had a job. They were all moms. And there was one woman who had a job, and she was the widow woman. I don't know if you guys had widow women in your neighborhood, but she had a
Yes.
job as a secretary. So I would say my aha was at 5 years old, saying, there's something not matching here. And then I think the next big moment for me when I was 19, because now we're talking about sexuality. And I had decided very early I was not going to want the job of wife and mother. So you certainly can't get pregnant. So that's when you really suppress your sexuality. And I just figured I'd be alone, isolated, and single the rest of my life, because I wasn't going to play the risk game of having sex and possibly getting pregnant. So by the time I got to 19 and found my first girlfriend, and like, oh my gosh, this is a thing. This is a possibility. Who knew? And so I had my first, sexual relationship with a woman, and like, okay, this is it. This is now an identity, I guess, because I'm going to be in this culture. And I was labeled a lesbian because I had sex with a woman. It's not that I didn't want to have sex with men, I chose not to, but because I was with women, now I'm a lesbian. So that was like, aha, I guess that's who I'm supposed to be now. But it really didn't address my gender identity. That was a sexuality label. You're either gay, lesbian, or straight. But what about that other stuff that has to do with the T part of LGBT, right? So when I was 48, after being an identified lesbian my whole adult life, then I met this male presenting person, and like, okay, well, now what's going on? And then we fall in love, and I'm like, wait a minute, I'm supposed to be a lesbian. What are you? And they said, I don't know, but I'm not straight. And I said, well, let's explore this. And all of a sudden, it's like, well, you're a non binary, non gendered person too. We kind of fall into that transgender umbrella because that's the gender queer category that now there's words for. So they shoved us under that umbrella. And it's like, well, I guess we're bisexual, but maybe we're pansexual, because if we're in the trans world, then it's maybe the word is pansexual. I don't know. So we've been given a lot of identities. So when people ask me, it's like, so what is your identity? I'm like, oh boy, do you have time for the story? Because I've been lesbian. I'm gay if I'm looking male and I'm with a male. You can call me gay. I guess I'm bisexual because I've had both partners. And I guess I'm trans because we're not gender non-conforming. And then we're definitely just the Q. We're queer. And really, to me, queer describes it, because we're not conforming to the binary systems of gender and the binary systems of sexuality. And I think queer is the best description. So those are my three big aha moments.
How did you have, or what type of sense of community did you have during this transitional time?
Boy, this was very interesting, because when I first came out and I was with my first partner, for 14 years, we were just kind of closeted lesbians. And so we had a small friendship group of other lesbian people. And then I became single for many years, and kind of my community, I was in education and just kind of went in the closet and didn't really have queer community at all, based on where I was living and the kind of intensity of my job. I just didn't really spend time socializing. But then when I found my new partner, um, it's like we were moving every 2 to 3 years with my job, so we intentionally, like, were trying to seek different jobs so I could retire at a certain level, and didn't really have a chance to build community, but we had each other, and that was enough. And both of us are not very strongly connected to our families. Yes, you could call it estranged, but weird. So, I still have connections with my family, but not authentically, meaning I play the game of just don't ask, don't tell. But when we were getting ready to retire, the whole point of where we were going to retire was so that we could find community and build community and actually have real friends with our real identities. I was never going to have to hide again as I did as an educator. I could just be my authentic self. So when I came to Bellingham, it was my intention is to find community and find friends and be part of a neighborhood and a community. And that's what we've been focused on. And that has really kind of turned into kind of helping others find community too, and trying to build community through an organization. And that's why we have the community center. It's kind of developed into, where do you find community? If you're looking for friends, if you're looking for people with common identities or interests, how do you really find that? If you don't have kids in school, and if you don't go to a church, where are those key third spaces where you can find people? And a lot of times it's like, oh, I'll join a hiking group. Well, that's great. I'll join a fiber arts group or the Whatcom Weavers Guild. That's great. But where do you find queer community? And it's not always easy for people to do that. So we really sought out community and tried to find it. And now we're trying to really build it up just to help it be more easy and more visible for other people to find some community as well.
For other people who, like you, are in professional jobs that where they don't feel the freedom to be themselves, what would you suggest? How would you help them mitigate that?
I feel like the worst person to give advice in this area. And it's because I was a landscape contractor. My partner worked for a private school that was very liberal. So we were open. We were very open. Then I became a public school teacher in a conservative area and had to go back in the closet. And after, having going through a divorce before marriage was legal, but after 14 years of breaking up and having to separate, I came out to my principal. I was a teacher, aspiring administrator. I was going to be the next in line to open a school. I'd already opened one as a teacher. Now I was going to do it as an administrator. But I came out to him because of concern. He was concerned about my well-being, and I was clearly depressed. And next thing I know, they're pushing me out of the district. And the superintendent came to me after an interview for the position of the new school principal and said, "You will never be prepared to be a principal in this district. And we are happy to give you a good recommendation to move on."
Wow.
And I was pushed out because I came out. The day I came out, our relationship changed. And so when I moved into that other new district, it was don't ask, don't tell. And so I was every year worried if I was going to be pushed out or fired, because I was not part of a union. I was an administrator, was never part of a union, and we didn't have protections back then. These were the 90s.
That's
If you think about that time period. So I was just very discreet and very closeted, and I never came out because I had already been pushed out and job threatened, and I was fearful. I was fearful. And so ironically, after years, then all of a sudden I get a male partner, right? At least
yeah.
a male presenting partner. You've met my partner.
Yep.
And I brought my partner to a TGIF after school. The principals all get together, and I had told a few people, "Hey, I have a new partner, so I'm going to be making some changes in my life." And they all assumed I was going to bring a woman to this TGIF party. And then here comes this guy walking through the door, and they were shocked, and because they had made the assumption. They knew, they knew what they knew, but without me telling them. And it was interesting. Within 2 weeks, After 14 years in this district, within 2 weeks, I had a meeting with the superintendent and the executive cabinet who said, "Why are you thinking about moving to San Francisco? Why don't you just, apply for a district level job here?"
Oh my.
I said, "You've had 14 years to promote me, and you've promoted 4 of my colleagues. I have clearly been prepared and ready, and you have skipped over me for years now. Why all of a sudden are you encouraging me? This is the very first time." "Well, we don't want you to leave and go to a different district now." And it was clearly because the threat of me being exposed as a lesbian went away once I had a male partner. And it was like, you know what? I am never going to stay here. I'm going to San Francisco and I'm going to be as gay as I want. And it was ironic because I went to the Bay Area but presented as a heteronormative kind of person, even though I look like a big old dyke. But it's like they kind of had to treat me nice because I looked normative. And it was fascinating how I was recruited literally I was propelled to the superintendency, and it had nothing to do, with all the hard work, and I was qualified for a long time, but it wasn't until I had a male partner, then all of a sudden I was recruited and pushed forward, and that's how I ended up finally retiring as a superintendent. But until I had a male partner, I don't think I ever would have become a superintendent.
Interesting. Even in California.
Oh, yeah. California is not what people think. There are pockets of liberalism, but it's a big state of a lot of bias and a lot of meanness down there. So, in my district, I probably could have been a lesbian, kind of leader, but I don't think they would have hired. I don't think they would have hired me, as a single lesbian person. But I never know. I suspect, but I really feel the advantages that came with me as soon as I had a male presenting partner. So you kind of just take advantage of the beard. And then I realized I'm not the person to give advice to because I hid. I hid. But if I were to do it all over again now in today's world, I would say be yourself. Don't hide. Put the picture of your partner up. Tell people who you are because the stress that it put on me was undue. And I wish I should have like been myself. And if it didn't work out, I should have moved into another career because I think I really missed out on a social life and a life of community by not being my authentic self for all of those years.
And how has that sense of community changed since you relocated?
Oh, it's so nice to be in a city where, the two of us can walk down the street and hold hands and not worry about it. I mean, even in California, the two of us walking around anywhere downtown, we would get screams, of, vulgar terms starting with an F. I don't know if Marla's gonna yet edit this out or not, but we would be harassed because we looked like two males, walking around and holding hands. And we just want to live in a place where we're with friendly people that are progressive, that there's a chance. And I know there's still a lot of harassment and discrimination that goes on in our city, especially people from the outside of our city that come and drive through, particularly in June and sometimes. But I love the community we're building now. I feel like I have 1,600 friends, only because I have a Facebook group with 1,600 people in it. And I feel like we're all connected. And I have never been in a queer community where I could be authentically myself and I never have to hide anything. And that's the first time in my life. So really, I had to wait until I was 57. Really, I gave Bellingham a year to figure out if it was safe or not before I felt like I could authentically be myself. But really, so until I was age 58, I didn't feel like I could really authentically be me, but now I can be. I've never been happier.
And how does that feel?
I think it took 10 years off of me.
Yeah.
When people see me, they're like, "Oh my gosh, you're 60, you look so young." I'm like, "I don't think I looked this young when I was working." I think being retired and being happy and feeling safe and feeling, like I'm part of a community, I feel happy every day, and I can't wait to get up and get going and do my volunteer work for the day and connect with my community. and just be in this beautiful environment. So part of it is I get to just be authentically myself. And I think that has made me feel like I'm part of a community.
That's awesome. That's really amazing. Do you feel safe now where you work and play?
I really do. I really do. It's interesting when I came to Bellingham, and I still hear things that people feel unsafe downtown. Downtown's not safe. Now, I've lived near San Francisco, Los Angeles, Sacramento, San Diego. I've lived in suburbs within 20 minutes of these big downtown urban centers. So I've spent a lot of time in downtown urban centers. That's where the fun things were. That's where we'd go to the entertainments, concerts and plays and restaurants and things like that. I think this is the safest downtown I've ever been in my life. And yes,
Wow. That's
we
saying
have
something.
it does say something, and it's because the smallness of our community, first of all, it's not so anonymous and large that people just disappear and hide. I think we know each other, we see each other. We have an unhoused problem like every other city, but the problem isn't housing, the problem is our economic system and our housing system, and that has to be resolved. And I see that the people who are living on the streets are not doing so by choice necessarily, and this is the problem of the community, and we have to solve it. But I've never been afraid of our unhoused community. I've had friends who've been unhoused. Many of them are on the edge right now of being unhoused. So when they talk about fearfulness, you always have to be cautious in downtowns because you're going to encounter things different, than you would in a suburb. But I feel safe in Bellingham. I don't feel safe when I leave Bellingham. I don't.
Interesting.
Within the first within the first 6 months of living here, we went up to Linden just because we're driving around. We're trying to figure everything out. We went to Woods Coffee up there, and immediately we were called derogatory names by a young adult and had to deal with this person. And we're like, oh, you just lived up to your reputation, Lyndon. And I've never been back, and I won't go back. And because it's just not worth it for me. I don't need to go up there and be harassed. And maybe it's different after 2 years, but I don't know. But I'm not going to do it. And when I'm outside of the city of Bellingham, I'm just more cautious, and it's not as friendly feeling for me yet. And maybe that's me who has to grow into getting to know the county area better and feel more comfortable. My partner rides his bike all over the whole county, and he's fine. But you know what? He looks like a white man, and he fits in everywhere. I don't. People are confused by me. I'm a gender nonconforming person that people don't always figure out what to do with me. So even if I go into a restroom in a restaurant in a community, sometimes women will stand outside until I'm done, or they'll come in and say, this is the women's restroom. And I'll say, yes, I do. I saw that on the door, and I feel like I have to educate them or help them along. So for me, I run into issues, and I've never run into that issue in Bellingham. Nowhere in Bellingham. So I just stay put. I'm very happy to be in the city of Bellingham.
Excellent. Well, let's see. If you could change something in the world relating to our LGBTQ community, what would it be?
I feel like more this is just a philosophy of mine. I don't think I can make change, but I'm looking at change. And I studied change management, in my doctorate program and how to lead transformational change. So what I learned about change is people are fearful of change for several reasons. And some of the big ones are they're afraid they're going to lose something they already have. They're afraid they might not be competent enough to navigate the change. So if you think about a business or an organization that might be putting in a new software system or something, people might go, oh my gosh, I don't know if I'm going to learn the new system and figure it out. I might feel incompetent, so, and then they might lose their status, their position. And there's more. There's like 7 big ones, but those 3 ones kind of stand out to me because as we are making changes in the roles of gender, and acknowledging sexualities, I think we've made amazing progress. in my lifetime since the 60s. It is amazing how far we've come. And we have vocabulary and words. I still struggle with pronouns because I just have to practice and help people. And people ask me what my pronouns are. And I think I dodged the bullet by saying, oh, all pronouns are fine with me. Just use whatever is comfortable for you. Because I am not so committed to making that like a fight with people or a controversy. And at the same time, I've been called a boy my childhood and adult life. I'm 6 feet tall. I'm often mistaken for men, so people will call me sir anyway. And I've always been fine with either one. I've never took offense to either one. So I think what my feeling is give people time to change, understand that they're going through some of these fears of change, and whether they're fearing a loss of status or power or possessions. The dominant culture, whoever is dominant, this you can be in China or Africa or America. Dominant culture is dominant culture. They don't want things to change because they've got it good. Right? That's kinda how it works. If you're on top, you don't want things to change because you may lose your status or your power or your resources. And I think what I hope the LGBTQ community can help demonstrate through living and just being is that our equality doesn't threaten your position. It doesn't. Just because I wear clothes the way I wanna wear my clothes or cut my hair the way I want does not take anything away from a straight person or a cisgender person. So hopefully that fear will go away when they see that people's rights aren't going to be taken away because someone else gets the same rights. And I think that we have to kind of prove to our community that you're going to be okay if we're equal with you. Equal rights doesn't mean you're losing something. It means that we're getting something, and it's not like a piece of the pie. Everyone's the pie gets larger. It's not like you're going to lose a
Yes,
piece.
right.
And I think that's with the gender thing, men have been dominant in our society and there's been roles for women. I think traditionally through our agricultural era, our industrial era, we've gone from those eras to technology and information age. We don't need the same roles and traditions and labor division that we used to use. I think we need to come around and acknowledge that. I don't need to be, unpaid labor in a family structure. If I'm a woman, I shouldn't have to bear that unpaid labor position of bearing children and caring for elders and serving a husband who has to go out and work for 10 or 12 hours. Those days are different now, and they can be. But some people are still holding on to that because they like that model and they're comfortable there and they want to be there. So they defend it and want everyone else to stay in it too. But that's changing and the horse is out of the barn.
That's
When
true.
I realized my mom passed away and my dad became ill and needed 24-hour care. And when we added up all the things that my mom did for my dad for 62 years, because she never worked outside of the home, she was worth over $200,000 a year. Because that's what we're
Wow.
paying someone to do for my dad right now. So think about that. I mean, that's the free labor of women has been taken for granted, and I think there's a real pushback about women leaving those roles because there is a cost. There's an economy to those roles, and we have to acknowledge it and try to educate and try to come to terms with it because it doesn't have to go away. You could have a queer kid who's very happy being a caregiver. Let them. Don't kick them out of the house and reject them from your family because that queer kid may be the one to take care of grandpa later in life. But
True.
it can be different and it doesn't have to be the same. And I think the same with sexuality. Humans and mammals have a spectrum of sexuality. We've studied it. There's hundreds of animals documented having homosexual behaviors with each other just for pleasure and fun. And guess what? So do humans. And I think the binary is constructed, it's false, and it's a way to control. And those controls may have been important at times when there was trying to control pregnancy and disease and patriarchy counted on women being monogamous, so they had a clean lineage to follow. But you know what? We're in a different era now. We have safe sex protections and we do have ways to control pregnancy. And the patriarchy is being challenged in a lot of different ways, now with inheritance and different rights and rules. So we're evolving and changing, but it's going to take time. And we need to continue to educate through one conversation at a time. We need to all integrate and be part of this society and contribute in some meaningful ways. And I always say we'll take 3 steps forward, and then the dominant culture is going to knock us back a step, but we're still 2 steps ahead. And then we'll
That's
take 3 more
excellent.
steps ahead. Maybe we'll go back a little bit. And we saw this with the civil rights movement, because we still have a racist culture and a caste system of color in America that we haven't acknowledged. And a lot of people don't want to, because it's very hard to deal with. But once we acknowledge it and see it and call it out, then we can start to dismantle that and not have these unfair systems in place too. And I really think it's similar with our queer community.
Excellent. Thank you. Well, that's all I have as far as questions. Can you tell us a little bit about the Q Center?
The Q Center is the first LGBTQ resource center north of Seattle, between Seattle and Canada. There are 5 counties between Seattle and Canada. And when I moved here, I was really shocked to find out there was no resource center in this region. That's what I thought that's where I would find community, either like a gay bookstore or a resource center, because most towns would have one of those 2 things. And when I worked as a school administrator and teacher, all 4 counties I worked on in California all had an LGBTQ center. And that was ranging from a more conservative county to a very progressive county, but all 4 had them. So when there wasn't one here, I was really kind of shocked. So part of my exploration on building community was, what do we need? How do we meet the needs? Where do we go? How do we gather? And over again, in kind of asking community members what they want or what do you think we need, people just kept saying, we need a place to gather, a gathering space, a community center that's not monetized, like a coffee shop. Or a restaurant where we would do a lot of meetings, because it's not private and you have to pay, and not everyone has that ability to pay. And so, working with Northwest Youth Services for the last couple of years, and I've been engaged in that organization to support them as a board member. They were ready to open their first community center and had the funds to do that. And they were going to be the leaders in this region of creating the first queer community center. So, the Bellingham Queer Collective, the organization I'm associated with, is partnering with Northwest Youth Services, who did receive a grant from the state to open a space. And we are now partnered with them. And then we are very appreciative and grateful, because they took the lead and they got the grant funding and they got the space and invited us to be a part of this space.
That's
So
wonderful.
our 2 programs combined, the Queer Youth Services, they've had direct services for youth for over 14 years. They've just never had a space dedicated to it. So they will operate from one part of this building. And then the Bellingham Queer Collective is 18 years and older, and we operate from a different part of the building. So combined, we're the Q Center, but we're 2 distinct organizations operating in this space.
And that's excellent news. Thank you. We've been trying to put something together for, oh, I don't know, at least a couple of decades, but now it's happening and it's wonderful. I'm
Well,
very happy.
we're excited, and people can learn more by going on the bellinghamqueercollective.org website to learn more about our center. But we're really focused on developing the social health of our community. That means we have interest groups, book clubs, fiber arts groups, movie groups, walking groups, writing groups. And now that we have a community center, we can do more. And we will partner with workforce, with Opportunity Council, with the Food Bank, with Planned Parenthood. We'll now partner with these organizations to get information and literature here, so that we can help point our community into the direction of resources that they may need as well. So we'll become a resource hub and kind of a navigational hub, but also a place to build your social community as well, and a safe place that is not monetized. It will be free for people to attend, and it'll be a safe space where you could just be yourself.
Excellent. Thank you very much. Well, I think that's about it for our interview today with Michelle and Harmeier. Is that correct, dear? I'm going to
Yes.
learn this. I'm going to learn this. So, thank you so much and valuable information. I so appreciate the work that you're doing in our community and the effort that you're putting forth to bring us all together as the beautiful mosaic of the citizens of Bellingham that we've grown to enjoy and love. Thank you, Michelle.
Thank you so much for having me, Betty Desire, and thank you for all you do for our community. And you were one of the very first people to welcome us to our community when we met in Rumors Cabaret. So thank you for walking up to our table and saying, "Hey, you look like you're new in town." And
It's a pleasure.
thank you.
You're welcome, dear.
That's what Betty does. She walks up to people at restaurants and just like harasses them.
Yep.
Yep, it was beautiful. That was our
That was
welcome to the
great.
community.
That's great.
Carla, do
That
you
was
have
a-
any questions?
No, I think you covered it all. I'm sorry that you don't feel safe in Linden still. I find that really very sad. Yeah,
Maybe I'll
I have
try it
friends who,
again.
well, I have a friend who is white and her partner is Japanese, and they got the same reaction. But this was many years ago. They won't go back either.
Mm-mm.
Yeah, it's unfortunate.
That's
Yeah,
So,
it
true.
is. It is what it is. But I did learn that the Whatcom Library system is doing a Pride in the Park activity,
in
and I
Linden?
think in Linden, somewhere up there. I was shocked. Maybe it was Blaine.
I think it's Blaine.
Is it
Yeah,
Blaine?
Blaine has a
Oh,
Pride in the Park coming up.
So
Happy
I
Dog
think
Pride.
someone may have donated a building to them, and they're going to build a new library or something up there.
oh, in Blaine. Yeah,
So it might be on
yeah,
that property.
that makes sense. Yeah. Okay. All right. Did you have any questions, Michelle? Because I need to get some stuff from Betty, so I'm
Did
going to
we
let
get?
you go.
How did timeline work out? I didn't pay attention.
Oh, I might have to edit some stuff out just because of timing, because I think I talked to Suzanne about a half hour,
Yeah.
and we went on for a little bit longer than that. But I think I try really hard not to edit out any content that's um important. And then, there were some off things, some hesitations and stuff that we truncate those. That'll save time as well. I mean, I edited Betty's introductory video audio to 14 minutes and 55 seconds.
Nice job, too. You made me sound intelligent.
Well, and you did not hesitate. You did not do any ums or ahs or anything, but you did hesitate a lot as you spoke. You were very thoughtful. And I thought, well, I liked the thoughtfulness of it, but it was in like another 5 minutes.
Wow.
Yeah. So I
have to speed that up.
I can't wait to
well,
hear it.
well, hopefully I think we're going to get one or two more interviews. I think we talked about
Yeah.
before we send them in so that we can do a regular scheduled thing. And we've got them all lined up. So in case one week we don't have somebody to interview, we're not struggling, And
Oh,
plus
okay.
I'm going to be gone for a couple of weeks in September, and, Betty's busy.
I
So
sure am. I
Thanks.
started my day at 5:30 this morning and I haven't stopped yet.
oh my gosh. Yeah, you're a better man than I hate to tell you. And I adore Brian. I think he's just lovely. So does Brian use they them too?
He says he's ungendered. Just call me Brian. Don't use pronouns.
Okay.
I
He's a
like
rad.
that. I really
He's a
do.
radical. He really is a radical, and he's writing his memoir. It's being edited right now. It's called Binary Damage. And
Wow.
Wow.
and it's about how all the damage the binary system has done to him personally. It's his own memoir, and he's
Wow.
gone through a lot of trauma through being a Vietnam vet is one way of being traumatized, but
Mhm.
also through the binary system of being treated horribly by your family when you're a little gay kid, and when you become an adult and you're not fitting in. And yeah, it's quite an interesting book. It's kind of heavy.
So
But
can I ask you, I don't know if this is a painful subject and if you don't have to answer,
are we still
like I
being
said,
recorded? Are we still
yeah,
being recorded?
yeah, but
Should
I
we?
won't, I'm not going to put this in. I do keep recording just in case something comes up, but I will not put anything in there that you don't want me to. And we won't
Okay.
put this in there, but I'm just asking, do you guys still have family that you're in touch with?
So he doesn't communicate with anyone in his family at all. He still has like 5 sisters who are alive. Like, I think one died and one brother died, but he doesn't talk to them at all.
Mm.
And then for my family, I talk to my dad every day for like 10 minutes, 15 minutes. I send him a dad video of the day or a picture of the day. But we kind of have this relationship where we just don't talk about
Yeah.
politics or anything. Because even when Brian came into my life, they were still, they kicked me out at 19. So at 19, I gave up my full ride scholarship because I was injured so much. But I'd already come out to them in November, but I gave up my scholarship because they said they would pay for me in college. But then literally a week after, I said, okay, I did it. I quit. And they're like, okay, well, you got to come home from school. You have to go live with us this summer and go to a psychologist that our doctor found for you. It
Oh,
was like a
okay.
conversion therapist.
Yeah.
And I'm like, are you kidding me? They're like, yeah, we're not supporting that lifestyle. I'm like, I just gave up my full ride scholarship. I would have sucked it up and played basketball a little
Right.
longer if I
Do
knew
you
they
think,
were.
Michelle, do you think they knew that once you gave up that scholarship that do you think that was done with
Oh, it was
knowledge?
intentional. It was done with knowledge because they waited between November. I asked assurance in April, if I quit, will you pay for me? Yes. And then May, when I quit, there was a week later, they said, Here's the deal." I said, "That's fine. I'm divorcing you," essentially, without using those words, and said, "Fine. I'm on my own. I'm 19. I'll figure it out." And I moved in with the girlfriend down in Van Nuys, North Hollywood. And we had the best summer ever. I got a job at a nursery. And I'm like, I'll just figure out my life. And
I'm
then it was
sorry.
time to go back up to San Luis Obispo. And I'd raised enough to pay for tuition. I found some friends who let me move in for free until I could raise some more money, to live with them. They just gave me a little bedroom. And then after a couple months, my parents were like, okay, well, just kidding. We'll help you out. We just didn't
Oh,
understand. We didn't know. But luckily they never took my car away or my gas credit card, right? Because it was all paid for through my dad's business, so they let that ride. But they saw that I was serious, that I wasn't going to play their game, and so then we kind of healed, and they learned, and pretty soon we were invited to the family holidays. And the worst part for them, not only was she lesbian, she was Jewish. So I
oh,
was Jewish for 14 years, I like to say, but her family was so lovely and
good.
loved us. And I was in the bar mitzvahs and the bat mitzvahs. And I would, we did like, I don't need you as a family. I've got them as a family. That's why it was okay to leave that family. And they finally came around, but they still never really came around. They were always embarrassed. They never introduced her as my partner. It was always my friend, even though they helped
Yeah.
us buy our first house together. They just didn't know what to do with it. They really didn't, and they were really ignorant, is what it comes down to. But they tried their best. And then Brian came around, and then they didn't like Brian either. I'm like, okay, that's it. I'm divorcing you again. So I divorced them again.
How could they not like Brian? He's wonderful.
He's
I think
great.
it's because my brother, who runs the business and controls the assets, didn't want this older guy who was a financial planner and
Oh,
knew
oh,
things meddling in his
yeah.
dynasty.
There you go.
And so it's like, what? I finally got a man. Isn't this okay with you guys? I found someone who's like tough enough to put up with you. My family's like the Sopranos, by the way. So I finally found like a veteran who could deal with this kind of a family. And then you guys don't want us in. And partly it was they knew he was queer because I had shared. Why? Because they're like, how can you guys be together? I said, because we're both like this. And they're
Yeah.
like, okay, well, we don't like either of you. And he's not going to play the patriarchy game. And he's a threat to the finances because, they have their own little secret, finance
Yeah.
plan. And
Yeah.
I said, fine, I'm done with you again. So I divorced my family again. And then I just ignored them. literally. My mom said, "Well, I guess I'll just send you cards." I said, "Do that. You can send me cards on holidays. That's fine." And about a year later, they kind of came around again. And another year later, here they are. They're at my dissertation defense. And they sat through my whole dissertation defense when I got my doctor's degree and asked good questions and participated and took pictures. And, they just were on their best behavior as being as proud as they could be.
Yeah,
But me being educated was also a threat to them.
sure.
Right? Every time I got a degree, because no one, I mean, my two of my siblings didn't graduate from high school. One of them barely did, so I was just a threat to them, and I was like every possible negative thing for them. So I'm still the failure of the family because I didn't get married and have kids. So,
Wow.
so it's like I've always had to find ways to self assure myself, and pat myself on the back because I was never getting it from them. So
Yeah.
I found my own ways to celebrate my own successes. And part of it was never being dependent on them and never trusting them again. So I still support my dad. And part of it was when my mom was dying of COVID, he was wanting to escape and leave and not take care of her. She was dying of COPD during, and then COVID hit. And the deal was, I said to him, I said, "Dad, if you leave now, none of us are taking care of you in your old age. And you are going to be by yourself and abandoned. So you take care of your wife." She did it to you. She took care of him like a slave for all these years. And he was a horrible husband. And so he did it. He stuck it out. He did everything he was supposed to do. And so the deal was, now here we are. And we're all supporting and taking care of him and supporting him. But that's the deal. It's very transactional.
Okay, I don't know if this is going to cut off in 30 seconds or not. I hope it won't, but I just wanted to let you know, Michelle, that if Brian ever I think Brian's older than I am, but I could be older than he is.
He's 77.
Yeah, tell Brian I'll be his bratty little sister anytime.
I'll tell him that.
Anytime.
Yeah, so we have quite an interesting story, but you know what? We have figured it out, and we've never been happier than being in Bellingham.
Good.
We're gonna die. We're gonna die here. That's our plan.
Well, not soon, I hope.
Wonderful, but not
Who?
for a long
Not
time.
for a long time, but you got to have a goal.
Yeah.
And we'll host death cafes. We're going to start a death cafe here in our center, which is discussions on how to manage and deal with death in your later years. The senior center used to host them, but they don't do it anymore.
Yeah.
But that's like one of those things is let's talk about it. Make sure everyone's ready. Get your things in order. So we're here to stay, I hope.
Good.
As long as people want the center, we'll keep it open. If that doesn't happen, then we'll just be part of the community. But right now, I'm willing to work as a free executive director.
Okay, so here's the thing. If the Q Center ever closes, we're going to take Michelle's keys and hide them.
Yep. Absolutely true.
Well,
Right.
I appreciate you guys and the support and everything else, and we're just going to keep marching along and doing the best we can.
Okay. Thanks for your time, Michelle. I really appreciate it. Matt, don't hang up because I want to get an intro and an out for you. So
okay,
not a problem.
Bye-bye.
All right. Bye, sweetheart.
Bye,
it's good to see you.
Thank you.
Okay. So I think we should do like my guest today is Michelle Harmeier, and then maybe for the end say my guest was Michelle Harmeier, and maybe if you have some thoughts about what she said, you can say that, and then say if you have any comments about the show, here's the website, or not the website, here's the email address. Can you do that?
I can do that.
Okay.
Our guest today has been Marshall. Oh, let's try this again. I just said I could do that, didn't I?
Mm.
Our guest today has been Michelle Harmeier. I hope you've enjoyed this interview as much as I have. And if you have any comments or any guests that you would like to hear about, please send an email to spillingteawithbettydesire@gmail.com. That's it for this episode. I'm looking forward to the next, and I'm looking forward to hearing from you. Goodbye for now, Betty Desire.
That's awesome. Okay. See, how hard was that?
Not hard at all. I'm really enjoying this.
She's amazing. Isn't she incredible?
Yes. Yes. And every guest we have, well, this is the first one, but now we have more opportunity to get another guest.
Yeah.
I would love to hear about Brian's book as it gets closer to
Yeah.
and his story, particularly coming from a Vietnam vet,
Right.
that age group. This,
Yeah.
I don't know what it is with me and technology. You can't see it, but I got this microphone and I'm trying to put it back in its stand. My tech just heard me.
I heard him.
Have you tried working the shaft?
Have I tried working the shaft? Oh, yes.
La 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 la.
You have to put this away by yourself. You have to pinch
You
the
too.
button.
I have
All
to
right.